It started almost as soon as I moved into the neighborhood. The house was perfect, the street quiet, and the lake nearby gave everything that serene touch I had always wanted. I thought I'd finally escaped the chaos of city life. But peace in an HOA neighborhood is always temporary, and mine came to an end the day I met her, Karen, the self-appointed queen of the cul-de-sac. She introduced herself within hours of my arrival, not with a smile or a welcome basket, but with a warning. "We like to keep things neat around here," she said, her tone sharp, eyes flicking over my front yard as if she was inspecting a military barracks. "Make sure your trash cans aren't visible from the street. HOA rules." I nodded, not wanting to start trouble. I figured she was one of those overly serious residents who lived for rules and regulations. I had no idea that this was just the beginning of her campaign against me. The first incident happened on a Monday morning. I had placed my trash can out the night before, as everyone else did. When I came out to go to work, my can was lying in the middle of the driveway, lid open, garbage scattered everywhere. At first, I thought maybe it was raccoons or the wind, but none of my neighbors' cans were touched. Mine was the only one tipped over. I shrugged it off, cleaned the mess, and moved on. The next week, it happened again. This time, I was more suspicious. I made sure the lid was secured tightly, positioned the can right against the curb, and even weighed it down a bit. Still, by morning, it was on its side again, trash spilled out like some cruel joke. The pattern continued every trash day, and I started to realize this wasn't an accident. Someone was deliberately knocking it over. I began paying closer attention, even checking with a few neighbors. Some looked uncomfortable when I mentioned it, as if they didn't want to get involved. One older gentleman who lived a few houses down gave me a sympathetic look and said quietly, "You might want to keep an eye on Karen. She's been difficult with new people." That was all the confirmation I needed. I had my prime suspect. I started watching her more closely, how she would take long walks in the evening right around the time people put their trash out, how she'd pause in front of certain houses, taking pictures or scribbling notes on a clipboard she always carried. It was like she was the self-declared sheriff of the block, and somehow, I'd ended up on her most wanted list. One evening, I decided to test my theory. I placed my trash can out as usual, but this time, I parked my car across the street so I could keep an eye on it from inside without being noticed. I sat in the dark with a cup of coffee, watching through the window. Around 9:30 p.m. there she was, Karen, in her bright pink windbreaker, walking her little white dog that barked at everything. She strolled past my driveway, stopped, looked around, and then gave my trash can a shove with her foot. It tipped over easily. She stood there for a moment, smirking, then walked away as if nothing happened. I couldn't believe it. The sheer pettiness of it almost made me laugh, but the fact that she'd been doing it for weeks made my blood boil. It wasn't just about the trash anymore, it was about control. The next day, I confronted her, though I kept my tone calm. "Hey, Karen," I said as she was checking her mailbox. "I noticed my trash can keeps getting knocked over at night. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" She froze for a second, then put on a fake smile. "Oh, maybe the wind did it," she said sweetly, though her eyes betrayed her irritation. "You really shouldn't keep your can out like that. It looks terrible from the street. The HOA has rules about that." I nodded slowly. "Right. The same rules everyone else seems to be ignoring, yet only my can gets knocked over." Her expression hardened. "I'm just trying to keep the neighborhood looking nice," she snapped, before turning and walking away. That was the moment I decided I wasn't going to play nice anymore. I reread the HOA handbook that night and realized something interesting. There was no rule stating trash cans couldn't be visible from the street, only that they had to be removed within 12 hours of pickup. In other words, she'd been making up rules to justify her harassment. That was all I needed to see her for what she was, a bully hiding behind bureaucracy. Still, I wanted to be smart about how I handled it. Escalating things too fast could backfire in an HOA community, especially with someone like her on the board. So I decided to play the long game. Over the next few weeks, I experimented. I moved my trash can to different spots, even switching the placement times, just to see how far she'd go. No matter where I put it, she found it. Once, I put it on the side of my house, well out of sight. When I came home later that evening, it was mysteriously tipped over behind my fence gate, something that would be required someone to actually enter my property. That's when I realized she wasn't just meddling anymore, she was trespassing. The thought of her walking around my yard at night infuriated me. I knew then that I couldn't rely on polite confrontation or logic. Karen didn't understand boundaries, she only understood consequences. By this point, I started to notice other neighbors growing tired of her antics too. One guy down the street told me she once called the HOA over his mailbox color. Another said she'd tried to fine him for having unapproved lawn ornaments. It seemed like everyone had a Karen story. She wasn't just targeting me, she had made herself the neighborhood enforcer. I realized if I wanted peace, I'd need to make an example out of her. But I wasn't going to do it with anger or shouting. I was going to use something she'd never expect, her own obsession against her. That night, as I stared at my knocked-over trash can under the dim glow of the streetlight, a plan began to form. I smiled to myself, the frustration fading into a quiet satisfaction. If Karen wanted to keep messing with my trash, then I'd give her something to remember. Something that would make her think twice before ever touching another can again. I didn't know exactly what that was yet, but I knew this much: the next time she reached out to knock over my trash can, it wasn't just going to fall, it was going to fight back. After weeks of her petty behavior, I finally decided to put an end to it once and for all. I'd had enough of coming home to find my trash can on its side, garbage scattered everywhere, and Karen smirking from across the street as if she had done the neighborhood some noble service. It wasn't about the trash anymore, it was about principle. She thought she could bully me into submission like she had done with everyone else. What she didn't know was that I don't back down, especially when someone crosses the line from annoyance into harassment. The night after the last incident, I drove straight to the local hardware store. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do yet, but I knew I needed something clever, something that would catch her red-handed. I walked down the aisles, looking at motion lights, alarms, and even a few fake snakes meant for gardens. Then my eyes landed on a row of small, motion-activated security cameras. They were compact, easy to mount, and came with night vision. Perfect. I bought 2 and went home with a plan forming in my head. The next morning, before I left for work, I installed one camera on a tree near my driveway, angled perfectly toward the trash can. The other I placed near the porch light, facing the street. I made sure they blended in with the surroundings so they wouldn't be noticed. If Karen wanted to keep playing games, fine, but this time, I'd have the proof. I couldn't wait for trash night. I put my can out as usual that evening, making sure it was in the exact same spot she always targeted. Then I sat inside with the porch light off, pretending to watch TV but really keeping one eye on the live feed from the camera on my phone. It was a quiet night at first. The street lights flickered, a few cars passed, and I could hear the faint chirping of crickets outside. Around 9:45, I saw her on the camera feed. There she was, in her usual pink windbreaker, her little dog tugging at the leash. She walked past my driveway slowly, glancing toward my trash can. I could tell from her body language that she was deciding whether to do it or not. Then, as if she couldn't resist, she looked around, made sure no one was watching, and gave the can a hard shove with her foot. It toppled over, spilling trash onto the curb. She gave a satisfied nod, then walked away as if nothing happened. I sat there grinning. Caught. Finally, undeniable proof. I downloaded the footage, made a few backups, and waited for morning. As soon as the sun came up, I put the can upright again, cleaned up the mess, and went about my day as if nothing had happened. Around noon, I saw Karen outside tending to her flowerbead. I walked over, calm and casual. "Morning, Karen," I said. She didn't look up. "Morning," she muttered, her voice clipped. "Hey, just wanted to let you know," I said, keeping my tone friendly, "I installed a new security system. You'd be surprised how clear the footage is, even at night." That got her attention. She froze, her trowel hanging in midair. "Footage," she repeated. I smiled. "Yeah. It records everything happening out front. Really helpful for catching unexpected visitors." I didn't say another word, just gave her a polite nod and walked away. I could feel her eyes burning into my back. She knew exactly what I meant. That evening, I got an email from the HOA board. It was almost laughable, an official notice reminding me that recording devices facing community areas may violate neighborhood privacy guidelines. It didn't take a genius to figure out who filed the complaint. I replied with a short message attaching the HOA's own policy, highlighting the section that clearly allowed personal security systems as long as they were on private property. Then, just to twist the knife a little, I included a still frame from the footage of Karen kicking over my trash can, time-stamped and clear as day. I didn't add any commentary, just let the image speak for itself. The next day, the HOA president called me personally to apologize for the misunderstanding and assured me that the issue would be handled internally. From that point on, things started to get interesting. Karen stopped knocking over my trash can, of course, but she didn't stop trying to get back at me. One morning, I found a neatly folded HOA violation notice taped to my front door. It accused me of having unsightly trash containers visible from the street, something she'd clearly written herself. I took a picture of it, forwarded it to the HOA board, and reminded them that they had already reviewed this issue. I attached the camera footage again for good measure. Later that afternoon, I saw the HOA president himself walking down the street, stopping at Karen's house. He stayed there for nearly 20 minutes. I could only imagine how that conversation went, but judging by the look on her face when he left, it wasn't good. After that, things in the neighborhood got quiet, eerily quiet. Karen avoided me entirely. She didn't wave, didn't speak, and started taking a different route when she walked her dog. It was as if she'd been deflated, her authority stripped away. A few neighbors, ones who had always kept their distance before, started chatting with me when I was outside. One even said, "We were wondering when someone was finally going to stand up to her." That's when I realized Karen had been terrorizing the whole neighborhood for years. It wasn't just about trash cans, it was about control, about her needing to feel powerful. She'd been using the HOA as her weapon, and everyone had just gone along with it to avoid trouble. But now, with one simple video, her reign was cracking. A few days later, I got a knock on the door. It was Karen. I could tell she didn't want to be there, but she had that forced smile plastered on her face. "Hi," she said stiffly. "I just wanted to apologize for any misunderstanding we may have had about the trash situation." I could tell the words tasted bitter coming out of her mouth. "Apology accepted," I said with a grin. "I'm glad we got that cleared up." She nodded quickly, mumbled something about neighborhood harmony, and left without another word. The moment she was gone, I laughed out loud. Not because I was happy to see her grovel, but because I knew this wasn't over yet. Karen wasn't the kind of person who gave up that easily. She might have backed down for now, but people like her always found new ways to stir trouble. Still, the victory felt good. That night, as I rolled the trash can out to the curb again, I couldn't help but smile. For the first time since I'd moved in, I didn't feel tense doing it. The street was quiet, the moonlight reflecting off the black lid. I even waved to a couple of neighbors who were setting theirs out too. They smiled back. It was a small, simple moment, but it felt like peace. I went inside, checked the live feed one last time, and watched as the cameras silently guarded my property. No movement, no late-night strolls from Karen, no surprises. I had my proof, I had my peace, and most importantly, I had my plan for what would happen if she ever tried anything again. Because deep down, I knew she couldn't resist forever. And when she finally did try one more time, she'd find out exactly why my new trash can was one she definitely didn't see coming. After catching Karen red-handed and watching her forced apology crumble under the weight of her own embarrassment, I thought the trash can war was finally over. For a few weeks, everything seemed peaceful. My trash can stayed upright, my driveway stayed clean, and Karen even started pretending I didn't exist. I figured she'd learned her lesson. But people like Karen don't just stop, they regroup, they stew, and then they strike when they think you've let your guard down. I was about to find out just how far she was willing to go, and she was about to find out that I wasn't the one to mess with. It started on a rainy Thursday morning. I woke up to the sound of something metallic scraping against the pavement outside. I looked through the blinds and saw Karen, dressed in her usual bright windbreaker, struggling to drag my trash can halfway down the street. I almost laughed. It was like she couldn't help herself. I grabbed my phone, opened the security camera app, and watched her on the live feed. There she was, in full color and clarity, grunting as she pulled my can toward her driveway. I didn't move. I wanted to see how far she'd go. She stopped near her mailbox, looked around nervously, then tipped it over again and walked away. I waited until she was safely inside before stepping out. The rain was still falling lightly, and I could see muddy tracks leading straight from her yard to the tipped-over can. I took a few pictures, uprighted it, and went back inside without saying a word. The next day, I decided it was time to end this game once and for all. If she wanted to keep knocking over my trash can, I was going to make sure she'd regret ever touching it again. I spent that afternoon in my garage, setting up what would become my masterpiece, a trash can she definitely wouldn't see coming. I'd seen videos online of people rigging harmless pranks using compressed air and motion sensors, and the idea hit me like lightning. I found an old motion-activated sprinkler system I hadn't used in years and modified it so that it could trigger when someone got too close to the trash can. Then I added a harmless but dramatic touch, a recorded barking sound that played through a small Bluetooth speaker hidden behind the bin. It was loud, realistic, and timed perfectly. The setup took me the better part of an evening, but by the time I was done, I was proud of my creation. It wasn't dangerous, it was just going to give her the scare she deserved. Trash day rolled around again, and I placed my special can right where it always went. I sat inside, pretending to watch TV but really keeping an eye on the live feed. Hours passed, and I started to think maybe she'd finally given up. But then, just after 10, I saw movement on the camera. There she was, creeping down the street like a thief in the night. She looked around to make sure no one was watching and then approached my driveway. I held my breath as she reached out to grab the trash can handle. The moment her hand touched it, the motion sensor kicked in. A blast of cold water sprayed straight up into the air, drenching her from head to toe. At the same time, the speaker erupted with the sound of furious barking. Karen screamed loud enough that I could hear it even from inside my house and stumbled backward, tripping over the curb and landing right in a puddle. She scrambled to her feet, dripping wet, shouting something I couldn't make out, and ran back to her house as fast as she could. I couldn't stop laughing. It was easily the most satisfying thing I'd ever seen. The next morning, I woke up to find a handwritten note taped to my mailbox. It read, "Your behavior is unacceptable and will be reported to the HOA." I chuckled, took a picture of it, and tossed it in the trash. By noon, the HOA president called me again, clearly tired of being dragged into our petty war. I received another complaint from Mrs. Jenkins, he sighed, using Karen's last name. She says you rigged some kind of trap. I explained exactly what I'd done. No harm, no damage, just a harmless deterrent on my own property. I even offered to send him the security footage showing her trespassing. He didn't even ask for it this time. Honestly, he said after a pause, between you and me, the board's done dealing with her. She's been a problem for years. Just keep the peace if you can. I could hear the exhaustion in his voice. Karen had burned through her last bit of credibility, and everyone knew it. Over the next week, the neighborhood started buzzing with gossip. People had heard her scream, and word of the trash can ambush spread fast. One of my neighbors stopped me while I was mowing the lawn. "Hey," he said with a grin, "did you really rig a trash can to spray her?" I just smiled and shrugged. "I don't know what you're talking about." He laughed. "Well, whatever you did, thank you. She's been harassing everyone for years. Maybe she'll finally back off." Apparently, she had complained to several people about sabotage and harassment, but no one took her seriously anymore. A few even joked that she should file a complaint with the Trash Can Association. Eventually, Karen stopped walking her dog past my house. She'd take the long way around, head down, pretending not to notice me whenever we crossed paths. The power she thought she had over the neighborhood evaporated almost overnight. Without anyone backing her, she was just another homeowner, one whose reputation was now soaked in embarrassment. The HOA even voted to remove her from the board a month later, citing unprofessional behavior. I wasn't at the meeting, but several neighbors told me the vote was unanimous. When I heard the news, I couldn't help but smile. Justice, it seemed, had a sense of humor. A few months later, as summer rolled in, I was sitting on my porch when Karen walked by for the first time in ages. She didn't say anything, just nodded awkwardly as she passed. Her dog barked once, then quieted. I nodded back. There was no need for words. We both knew the war was over, and I'd won it not with anger or shouting, but with patience, proof, and a little creativity. From that day on, my trash can stood tall and untouched. Every trash day, as I rolled it out, I couldn't help but grin a little, remembering the sight of Karen running home dripping wet and screaming. The best part was, the neighborhood changed after that. Without Karen constantly breathing down everyone's necks, people started talking more, relaxing more. Kids played in their yards without being scolded for noise violations, and neighbors started organizing small barbecues again. It was like the community had taken a deep breath for the first time in years. As for me, I learned something valuable. When you're dealing with someone like Karen, someone obsessed with control and authority, the best way to win isn't by fighting their fire with fire. It's by outsmarting them, letting their own behavior expose them, and giving them a taste of poetic justice. And every time I see my trash can sitting proudly at the end of my driveway, untouched and upright, I'm reminded of the simple truth that sometimes, karma doesn't just come knocking, it comes with a hose, a speaker, and perfect timing.